God, our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Hello, and welcome to Faith Afield. Today we want to talk about a subject that is vitally important to everyone, and that is God's salvation or His deliverance. Throughout all of the biblical record, we can look and see where God has saved individuals or groups for eternity or for a particular situation that they were facing. And at this point, let us go to Scripture and see God's deliverance or His salvation. We want to start in the beginning, in the Garden of Eden. God had created Adam and Eve, had placed them in the garden where they might dwell forever in His presence. But in Genesis 2:16 and 17, we see that God has given them a condition for their continued existence inside the garden. He wants them to live in a place that is with Him for all of eternity, giving them the tree of life in order for them to do so, but there is a condition placed upon them. They shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in doing so they would surely die. Their continued deliverance and their continued existence with God in His presence was conditional upon their not eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Moving on to Genesis chapter 6, we see the account of Noah and the flood. Beginning in verse 5, we see that God looks around the world to the wickedness that existed and how the thought of their heart was only evil continually. We continue reading that Noah found grace in the sight of God and that God saved Noah and his family from the flood. But we notice that Noah's salvation, like Adam's and Eve's, was conditional. God told Noah to build an ark out of a certain type of wood, out of specific dimensions, and in a specific way. And in verse 22 of Genesis chapter 6, we see that thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. Noah and his family's salvation was freely given to God, freely given by God, but we also see that it was conditional upon their being obedient to God's will. We move on to Joshua chapter 6, and in the first 20 verses, we see Joshua and God communicating. God has freely given to Joshua the city of Jericho. He says, "See, I have given unto thine hand Jericho." When we notice that, we also notice that God placed conditions on this free gift given to Joshua. Because at the time that God gave the city to Joshua, it was still straightly shut up. The people in it were still defending the walls, and it was still in very much opposition to the nation of Israel. But God says, "See, I have given unto thine hand Jericho." But we notice that God gave them conditions to meet to obtain this wonderful gift. God said, "Thou shalt march around the city 7 days, once a day for 6 days. On the seventh day, you will march around the city 7 times. The priest shall blow the trumpets, the people shall shout, and God will cause the walls to fall down flat." We see that Joshua and the nation of Israel complying with these requests, and God indeed fulfilling on His promises. These are not the only instances where we can see God's deliverance or salvation as being conditional. We can look at Numbers chapter 21, where God has sent serpents down to afflict the nation because of their disobedience. God, however, gives them a free gift, a way to rid themselves of the pain and the venom caused by the biting of the serpents. God has instructed Moses to put up a brazen serpent, a serpent made of brass, and in Numbers 21, 7 through 9, we see that whoever looks upon that brazen serpent will be healed, whoever does not will not be healed. We see that God gives them the means to be healed, but they have to meet the conditions in order to do so. We move on to Naaman the leper, the captain of the host, in 2 Kings chapter 5. In verses 10 through 14, Naaman the leper seeks deliverance from God. God's prophet tells him to dip himself in the river Jordan 7 times. Now we understand that dipping in any river, any number of times, is not a cure for leprosy. However, Naaman, complying with these specific requirements or conditions, is cleansed by God. We see throughout the Bible that individuals who meet God's conditions are saved in the exact way that God promises salvation. And in the next video, we want to look at how this applies to our eternal salvation in the New Testament. We invite you to come back with us again. For now, I'm Josh Robinson with Faith Afield.
God is an awesome